We are now in Kant lecture, part 5. Here we're going to talk further about universality of law, but this time as the test of the goodwill. We're going to discuss the faulty promise example and the logical problem in the absence of universality in the law. The logical problem. All of the preceding about the goodwill as a law makes it clear that the goodwill is constituted or accessed by pure reason independently of our sensible side. But how does this pure reason work? How can we access something by pure reason without the use of the senses? Is it not that everything we experience is through the senses in some way? Reason can institute a test, by means of which it can know whether a law at hand really is a law that is goodwill or not. Since we know that laws of goodwill must be universal in form, apply always everywhere for everyone, then any principle that cannot work as a universal law is not a principle of the goodwill. It means that principle is based on our feelings, desires, preferences, all these things that Kant refers to as inclinations, right? So those principles that cannot be willed as universal laws are founded on our inclinations. Kant offers another famous example. Well, it has become famous by now, by the many generations of reading of Kant. So Kant offers another famous example to illustrate this point, making a promise that one does not intend to keep. This example is key to understanding the goodwill and a Kantian conception of reason in relation to reality that Kant claims is also ours, yours and mine. A person finds that they must borrow money from an acquaintance, and then they must promise to repay it. But that person also knows that they cannot repay it. So the principle behind their actions could be construed this way. Go ahead and borrow money with a promise to repay, knowing that you will not, whenever it is beneficial to do so. Why else would one want to do it? This principle cannot be made into a universal law that everyone follows. Imagine if there were signs everywhere. It is the law in our society to borrow money with a promise to repay, knowing that we will not, whenever it is beneficial to do so. That would never work. But of importance here is the reason why it would not work. The problem is not that so many loans would go bad and nothing would get done, and this would not be a good society to live in. That would be an appeal to harmful effects of the law, and that is not what the goodwill is all about. It isn't about effects, remember? The problem here is logical or purely rational. The law commands what it, at the same time, makes impossible, right? In the case of making a promise that one knows one will not keep for the sake of benefits, the law commands what it at the same time makes impossible. The law involves a logical or rational contradiction. The law commands that we borrow money and promise to repay without intending to repay it. But if that's made into a universal law, under those conditions, no one would ever lend anyone any money. There would not be the trust required for it, right? So the law commands us to borrow money in this fashion, but by the very borrowing of money in this fashion, there simply wouldn't be such a thing as borrowing money. There's a contradiction in the law. It commands what it makes impossible. Go ahead and borrow money with a promise to repay, knowing that you will not, whenever it is beneficial to do so. That rule or principle cannot be practiced as a law that everyone follows, but only as an exception to the law that everyone follows, as a private and subjective rule or principle. That means this rule is based on inclinations and benefit seeking rather than on rational goodwill that seeks to do what is right simply because it is right. Go ahead and borrow money when you know that you will repay it. The very opposite of that principle, on the other hand, can be practiced as a universal law and passes the test of the goodwill. So borrowing money without intending to repay it cannot be practiced as a universal law. On the other hand, go ahead and borrow money when you know you will repay it. Yeah, there's the universal law. And that is something that is compatible with goodwill. In general, then, only those principles that can be practiced as universal laws can be the principles of goodwill and should be our principles if our actions are to have moral worth and be worthy of respect. All other principles are simply aiming to gain some sort of an advantage, some sort of a benefit. Nothing worthy of respect there. It's simply doing what we prefer to do.